God bless America. Sea Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Perú, Ecuador, Brasil, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Panamá, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, México, Cuba, República Dominicana, Jamaica, Haití, las Antillas, United States, Canadá, my motherland, mi patria, Puerto Rico. Seguimos aquí.
It was awesome. Even if you didn't understand a word of it, it made you smile, made you dance. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock now in New York. What an uplifting end to a really amazing performance. You heard Bad Bunny there, God bless America, he said, during his Super Bowl halftime show. Behind him on the Jumbotron, you couldn't miss it. It said, the only thing more powerful than hate is love. And on the football, he was carrying Together We Are America. Inspiring, positive, dare we say, patriotic, evidently. Not for Donald Trump and his crew. No, for them. In the course of their performative outrage today, what we just watched was somehow, some way, an insult to who, we're not clear. For them, Bad Bunny's 13-minute tribute to togetherness and fun and art and performance and culture was laden with political messaging and anti-MAGA stuff. And then there was this complaint.
Is it too much to ask to put it in English? I mean, just can we put it in English?
Most of it, obviously, not even in English. You have Forbes magazine with an article titled, quote, "What did Bad Bunny say at the Super Bowl halftime show?" Great question.
Not one word of English.
Yeah.
Not one word of English. One word.
It's so funny because when they played Tucker Carlson's clips from the Putin interviews, I checked and none of those guys ever complained that none of the words are in English. But I digress. For the record, God bless America is 3 words in English. But the point is, what wasn't enough for MAGA, figures who alternated between insisting, we didn't watch it, to we watched all of it because that's the only way we know that none of the words were in English. Donald Trump himself watched it. Poor Kid Rock. Never thought I'd say that. And ranted and raved on social media about it, insisting the show is terrible, one of the worst ever. Nobody understands a word the guy's saying. My God, has anyone listened to a Trump speech lately? And then Trump said this about the dancing. It was, quote, disgusting. He called the performance a slap in the face of our country. Again, this guy is in, according to Danny Bensky, the Epstein files, more than Harry Potter's in Harry Potter. But the dancing, it's quite a review for someone who's refusing to apologize for posting a now deleted and blatantly racist video portraying President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. From the New York Times, quote, speaking to reporters on Air Force One Friday, Trump said he only saw the beginning of that video. Quote, I just looked at the first part, and it was about voter fraud in some place, Georgia, maybe? Trump said, quote, I didn't see the whole thing. Then tried to deflect blame, suggesting he had given the link to someone else to post. Quote, I gave it to the people. Generally, they'd look at the whole thing, but I guess somebody didn't, he told reporters. It was like 2 a.m, so yeah. Still, Trump offered no contrition when pressed. No, I didn't make a mistake, he said. Competing definitions of what exactly constitutes a slap in the face to our nation is where we begin the hour with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. National political reporter for The Bulwark, Adrian Karaskia, here. Also with us, Princeton University professor, political analyst Eddie Glad is here. And Molly John Fast is back, host of Fast Politics, a New York Times contributing opinion writer. Adrian, I actually thought of you last night, and I didn't want to ruin whatever, vibe you have, but I wanted to hear your review. Was it everything that we talked about Friday, everything you hoped it would be?
Yeah, it was everything I hoped it would be. I just had this permanent smile on my face the entire time. But I do sort of hate that everything in my mind goes back to politics. I was like, oh man, MAGA's hating this. Oh, they're hating this moment. But it was joy. And I think it goes partly to some of the stuff we've talked about, which is that the Grammys was his sort of explicit, do you need a statement from me? Here's my statement. Here's how I feel. And then the Super Bowl was allowed to be his art, and it was allowed to be fun. and celebratory, people dancing. What I took away from it was that he's affirming our humanity at a time when this administration is denying our humanity. And that goes for Latinos, that goes for immigrants, that goes for US citizens. And so that there's clearly it goes completely against what MAGA is into, and they are offended by the fabric of every piece of his performance. But you could see the way that he was speaking to America and saying that together, we're stronger, and that unity. It was a really powerful message.
I didn't think about MAGA. I thought about the NFL, and I thought about Goodell, and I thought about Colin Kaepernick, and I thought about this choice from the NFL, right? Like Bad Bunny didn't pick himself. He was chosen by the NFL with all these MAGA owners, and they seemed really into it. I want to show you, this is the video of the embrace. I think we have that. We'll find it. But just talk about why the NFL sided with Bad Bunny over, the MAGAtron, MAGA world, whatever we're calling MAGA.
I was thinking about this today. You go back to last February and last year, and there were so many institutions, law firms, universities that were just cowing to this administration, so afraid of it. Well, it turns out if the people aren't with MAGA, as polls show that are going against a lot of issues, their view of the economy and immigration and things like that, well, then all they have is fear. And that's why they are so upset, and they don't want people to be into something like this performance that dares to say love is the only thing more powerful than hate, And so for all those reasons, and like we said, it was a party, it was fun, it was a good time, and not whatever they did as their counter programming.
Okay, so this, ding, 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 this. Okay, so the people have driven the culture. Sports is responding to the culture, responding to the people. And as Heilman always says, politics is downstream from culture. You've now lost the people who have put steel in the spine of culture, who have put steel in the spine of sports, who now, I think, prove, and let me put up some of the Olympians. I mean, this is happening every day in Italy since the Olympics started last week. This is athletes. This is Hunter Hess. Let me show you this.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think. It's a little hard. There's obviously a lot going on that I'm not the biggest fan of, and I think a lot of people aren't. Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S.
And then New York Times reports that Chloe Kim, Eileen Gu, spoke out after Trump called Hunter a loser. He said, quote, "I'm sorry that the headline that is eclipsing the Olympics has to be something so unrelated to the spirit of the games. It really runs contrary to everything the Olympics should be. The whole point of sports is to bring people together. One of the very few common languages, that of the human body, that of the human spirit, the competitive spirit, the capacity to break not only records, but especially in our sport, literally the human limit." How wonderful is that? That all these folks who have nothing to gain, right, by sticking their toe into politics are more brave than the law firms, than the universities that capitulated, than the tech. I need a forum where I can swear. We're going to do that soon, right? The tech who stood shoulder to shoulder with no shame with Donald Trump. Tim Cook, who showed up at the White House in a tuxedo the day after the second American citizen was killed in the streets of Minneapolis. This all emanates from the courage that the people, it started in Minneapolis, it's gone coast to coast, have displayed in the face of Donald Trump.
Culture is the site of contestation. It's the argument. It's the space where we work out who we are. It's the space where we live who we are, right? You can have an idea of what America is, right? And it could look like what MAGA thinks it looks like. But then you run up against our actual lives. Right? You might be in some rural town in Iowa, right? But if you live in the cosmopolitan spaces of the United States, what we saw last night, what we heard last night, it wasn't so unfamiliar to us. So culture is this complicated space. And sometimes arguments bubble up. Sometimes arguments evidence themselves in very forceful ways. Sometimes culture can bounce back and push back. That's not who we are in so many ways, right? But also culture is complicated because the NFL understands its growth market. It's clear, right? So yes, there's all of this stuff going on. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee could hurt the bottom line, but this is the most streamed artist in the world. And if there's expansion possible, we might be going into these Spanish-speaking countries in so many ways. So we don't want to overread it in some ways, but we also want to understand it as the site of, how can I put it, the way in which America actually lives. It's the mess, the messiness of democratic culture.
It's also at a time when Trump is so obsessed with presenting his, bouffant and his orange skin as an apex figure in our culture. It is a sign that he is not more powerful than Bad Bunny. He is not more powerful than the NFL. It is a puncturing of what he's projecting as his power.
That creates a sense of terror, right? A panic that flows from that we are not who we say we are. There's this wonderful line that James Baldwin often pushes. He says, we need to crack open the image of America to see what it hides and obscures. And most of the time, what it's hiding and obscuring is a panic around the lie that actually informs the bouffant, because deep down, you can hear the diversity on our tongue. You can taste it in our food. You can hear it in the sound of the music. Whatever makes America swing is rooted in the diversity that makes this place unique. We're like no other place in the Western world.
Less than 14% of the nearly 400,000 immigrants arrested by ICE since President Trump returned to office a year ago have been charged with or convicted of violent criminal offenses. That is according to official statistics contained in a DHS document obtained by CBS News. Joining us, MS Now senior national and political reporter Jacob Soboroff. Also with us, NYU law professor and MS Now legal analyst Melissa Murray. Let's talk about the stats here. 14% had convictions, fewer than 14% had convictions for violent crime.
And on top of that, less than 2%, this is great reporting by CBS, less than 2% of those arrested by ICE over the past year had homicide or sexual assault charges or convictions. Less than 2% of 400,000. Another 2% of those taken into ICE custody were accused of being gang members. The larger picture is what we have seen anecdotally over and over and over again. They are not going after the worst of the worst, and you cannot institute the largest mass deportation program by going after only the worst of the worst.
There are not that many of the quote-unquote worst of the worst to go after, that if you want to do mass deportations, if you want to exceed the number of deportations that President Obama did, if you want 1 million people a year, that you're going to have to get people who are not violent criminals. It's just part of the issue.
Of course. And in fact, many of these states, Gavin Newsom, when I spent time with him, and Tim Walz also made it a specific point to let me know that they do cooperate from their state prison systems by handing the so-called worst of the worst over to ICE and to the federal government. And it's the county and the city jails that the federal government is trying to go into to get people maybe that don't even have convictions, might even be pre-trial for misdemeanor offenses.
It's confusing because on the one hand, you have deport them now, mass deportations now, which was at on the placards of the RNC. But you also have the president of the United States saying we need to go at this with heart. He's talking about people who have been here for 10 or 20 years, how they deserve to be here. He mentioned to the New York Times comprehensive immigration reform. So he seems to be saying one thing, signaling to certain people out there that it's only the bad people that we want to get out, not everybody else. But the actions of this administration are speaking to another hardline version of the MAGA base who wants to get every undocumented immigrant out of this country.
Bingo. And it reminds me of a moment that I will never forget, which is in my film with Errol Morris about family separation, when Donald Trump is sitting there signing an executive order to stop the family separation policy in late June of 2018, stopping a policy that he himself and the woman over his shoulder, Kirstjen Nielsen, put into place with her own signature just months before.
So we have an echo of that today, and this is reporting from ProPublica. Again, ProPublica, which released those haunting and horrifying audio of the children who had been separated from their parents crying during the first administration.
Ginger Thompson at the time really said.
So they have new reporting, and this is letters from kids who are being held in Dilley, Texas, the same detention center that Liam Conejo Ramos was held at. What do these letters say?
More extraordinary reporting by Michael Rosenberg here. And I want to just read some of the letters. Again, it gets to the point you can't have mass deportation without locking up not just nonviolent people, but children as well. Dilley has been a family detention center in this country in Democratic and Republican administrations. It was closed down during the last one. It's now reopened. Before, most of the kids that were there had been apprehended crossing the border. Now many kids are there being taken from the interior, out of their own day-to-day lives, going to school, speaking perfect English. Here's one letter. I miss my school and my friends. I feel bad since when I came here to this place because I have been here too long. This is a 9-year-old detained for over 50 days. Here's another letter. I have never been separated from my siblings, and it's honestly sad because they were little and they need their mom and their sister, and that's Ariana, whose U.S. citizen siblings are 2 and 5 years old. She's been detained for 45 days.
She's just 14 herself.
These stories they will rip your heart out of your chest when you read them, and it is impossible to think anything other than these aren't the worst of the worst. You don't have to think very hard. You don't have to read for very long. Go listen to the audio. It's some of the most extraordinary reporting I've seen in the second Trump term about who is actually being detained in all of this.
And you've seen no moves by the Trump administration toward comprehensive immigration reform, toward a pathway for citizenship if they would want it, nothing beyond just deport as many as we possibly can.
And not only that, they're looking at opening more detention centers that would house families.
Melissa, there's also the issue of trying to go through with all of these investigations, these prosecutions in Minnesota. What's happened in Minnesota and in Minneapolis has caused a wave of resignations in that state. The top ICE lawyer in Minnesota has departed as immigration lawsuits overwhelm the courts. We've also seen reporting, Melissa, that because there are so few prosecutors, the federal government has had to bring in JAGs.
You know, it's all, again, this is a real crisis within the Department of Justice, people becoming demoralized and leaving. If I could just take one beat on something that Jacob just said with regard to that CBS News reporting, it also shows that a very small number of those detained are members of gangs, which is something the administration has touted over and over again and has been the basis for the administration's invocation of really extraordinary federal interventions like the use of the Alien Enemies Act to expel individuals from this country to foreign countries and to foreign prisons. So again, just the underlying statistical evidence and foundation for this immigration program seems to be really shaky. With regard to what's happening at DOJ, we are seeing record numbers of career officials leaving the Department of Justice. And that's a real problem, not just in terms of immigration enforcement and the kind of backlog that we're seeing increasing. It was already backlogged. It's becoming even more backlogged. But it also has real consequences for DOJ's ability to address other kinds of crimes or other kinds of investigations in those areas. So, for example, in Minnesota, the U.S. Attorney's Office was not just handling ICE enforcement in those kinds of cases. They were also dealing with a massive fraud investigation. That's going to be very hard to continue to address if, in fact, the people leading that investigation have left, which is the case. So this is sort of a broader question of what's happening in the Department of Justice and losing people who are career prosecutors with real expertise.
Melissa, is it fixable? Can you get those people back?
It can be fixed. I don't know that a lot of people are going to be coming back in droves. And I think the real question isn't about fixing it, but what will replace it. So if you follow those who study the way democracies slide into autocracies, one of the things they note that is in administrative agencies like the DOJ, for example, when career people leave because they can no longer abide what is happening, that's a perfect opportunity for those who are loyal to the regime to burrow in and really become entrenched. So the question isn't whether there's a quick fix, but what will happen going forward to make sure that this isn't just an arm of a broader, more autocratic and oppressive regime.
So on this subject, just briefly to end this, on the subject of the messaging from the Trump administration about what they were going to do regarding immigration when Donald Trump was running a second time, he had two very different messages. One of them was mass deportation now, again, as Jacob and I saw at the RNC. But the other one was, as Melissa was pointing out, we're going to get all the gang members out. We're going to get all the criminals out. And those two messages went to two different sets of people. One that want hardline immigration reform or just the border being shut down and all of the immigrants out. They want them gone for economic reasons or for other reasons. And the other one was to people who were on the fence, who were scared and nervous about crime and who were nervous about what they were seeing online, the messaging coming out of the administration. The Daily from the New York Times has an incredible incredible podcast today about those two different sets of Trump voters and how they feel about what has been happening in this country over the past few weeks, couple months. It is definitely worth a listen, and I recommend everybody take one when they have the time. All right, Jacob Soboroff, Melissa Murray, thank you.
We begin, though, with a serious and important story about accountability and updates in the Epstein scandal. The Miami Herald, which broke this story wide open, we've shown you that before. We credit the Miami Herald with reopening that case on our timeline. Their top journalist on this story, Julie K. Brown, reporting that Trump may have had a lot more knowledge about Epstein than what was known at the time. You can see the headline here with serious sourcing, and we'll update that as we get into this story. While the top update out of Washington is that Ghislaine Maxwell, of course the convicted associate of Epstein, has now formally pled the Fifth during her deposition before Congress, and lawmakers spoke out about that.
As expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the Fifth and refused to answer any questions. This obviously is very disappointing.
She was not at all remorseful about pleading the Fifth today. What we did not get were any substantive answers to the questions that were asked that would advance our investigation.
I don't think she had the legal right to plead the Fifth Amendment. I'll just say that, but she did.
The fact that this woman is continuing to invoke the Fifth Amendment tells us exactly what my colleagues have already stated. She is a monster. She does not care.
You can hear it there, and that includes, of course, members of both parties agreeing that this was wrong. Of course, only one party currently, the Republicans, have a DOJ that granted her leniency in her prison upgrade and a very unusual setting where she did talk. The Times reporting that she refused to answer these questions. Her lawyer said she would, quote, speak fully and honestly if she got clemency. Now, Maxwell spoke to Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, who's now the number 2 at DOJ, last summer. And at that period, she answered questions not for half an hour or clarifying. It was actually 9 hours. And I want to remind everyone that her attorney said she answered every question. This went over 2 days, and best as we understand it, although the DOJ has not exactly been fully transparent along the way, but best as we know, she got a kind of limited treatment, a limited immunity in order to engage over there, which raises questions about why she would be willing to tell the DOJ one thing and Congress nothing. That's when she got the upgrade I mentioned, moved to a better prison, raising questions about whether that was a reward. Now, in journalism, we can tell you that circumstantially, it looks like a reward. That's circumstantial evidence that she did something, and then DOJ, which controls the Bureau of Prisons, did something for her. But there is not, for example, some smoking gun exposition yet on exactly why someone who was serving a sentence here, the only person we know of in the U.S. serving a sentence with Epstein's crimes, getting better treatment. Pretty wild. Lawmakers also building on the pressure and the loss they dealt Trump in the Epstein law, because now they're looking at Epstein files that even we in the public and journalists haven't seen even since that release, because they've got the unredacted files. One key Democrat who runs that committee, the minority side of that committee, Jamie Raskin, responding.
I believe that there were tons of completely unnecessary redactions in addition to the failure to redact the names of victims. I think that the Department of Justice has been in a cover-up mode for many months. There are certainly lots of names of other people who were enablers and cooperators with Jeffrey Epstein that were just blanked out for no apparent reason.
Blanked out for no reason. That is a description. So if Raskin's telling the truth, that's a problem for DOJ. And if it was habitual, if it's pattern behavior defending or protecting people who are not supposed to be redacted under the law, remember, this isn't just a dispute. That would be a violation of the law. Why does that matter? Well, it doesn't mean that someone at DOJ is going to be hauled off to prison immediately. That's not the kind of law this is. But just as the law ultimately got so many of these documents out, violations of that law that are provable based on the material and going to court could get those unredacted documents ultimately out as well. People are still, of course, going through the 3 million documents. Among the files is new footage of Maxwell's 2016 deposition, where she's asked about the schemes to traffic underage girls.
Did Jeffrey Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls to use them for sexual massages?
Objective form of examination.
Can you I'll ask it a different way. Did Jeffrey Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls for sexual massages?
Objective Forum Foundation.
If you know. So, I don't know what you're talking about.
To be clear, I don't know what you're talking about isn't even no. It's just sort of, I can't deal with this question. The lawyer obviously doing their job to make objections for the record, but this was the pressure that was originally building up civilly. As we know, the difference from then to now is she's been criminally convicted. Now, there are more calls for accountability at these people who've popped up in the files, and we've been charting this on our timeline, as mentioned. We've charted how a current cabinet member, Secretary Lutnick, had claimed in public, he didn't have to, but he went out of his way to claim in public that he'd cut off contact with Epstein. That big, sweeping, televised denial is now undercut by what you see there, him and Musk emailing about visiting the island. He's facing calls to resign or be fired. The House Oversight Chair says they could subpoena him. And again, this is still sometimes, on some issues, bipartisan. Here's a Republican on the matter.
Howard Lutnick clearly went to the island, if we believe what's in these files. He's got a lot to answer for, but really he should make life easier on the president, frankly, and just resign. If this were Great Britain, he'd already be gone.
That's a Republican's view about the level of scandal. And as we've been careful to point out, being named in files or being embarrassed or showing poor judgment is not the same as the criminal standard. And no one is alleging that most of the names we've mentioned, for example, tonight, were proven to be involved in the actual sex crimes that Maxwell, for example, was convicted of. But at the level of judgment and the problems the Trump White House has had, including in delaying, denying, releasing these files even after they passed a law requiring it, you would think that the White House wouldn't want to just stand by someone who is now busted in their own writing requesting to visit the island. And yet the White House is standing by Lutnick. There's also new revelations tonight that I mentioned. Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown reporting that in July 2006, Trump actually called the then Palm Beach police chief, telling him Epstein's activities with teenage girls were well known, that he was described or remembered to have as having said, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." That is according to a 2019 FBI interview with the police chief, which has now been revealed in these files. So again, the written records, the things that some have tried to hide, are still coming out. Apparently, Trump had told the police chief, according to this account, that he was around Epstein once when teenagers were present, and Trump got the hell out of there. Julie, let's turn to the actual violation as described by Republican member Massey of this DOJ. They violated the law on the deadline, and he says, and we have a lot of accounting of this today, new today, that one positive, people are understandably skeptical. They say, how's this all work? At least the lawmakers are going in and they're looking under those now infamous redactions, and they're saying some of them are wrong and they better fix them. Where does that fit into getting to the bottom of this? What do you see happening on that process?
Well, it's good that they are aggressively looking at what these redactions are about. But I still think that larger problem is that this case, there's no evidence that we have seen, or the victims for that matter have seen, that indicate that the DOJ has investigated some of these allegations that are contained in there. And this isn't just about these anonymous tipsters. There are allegations throughout these files that we're seeing that have women's names attached to them. They're redacted, thankfully, in some of these places, or hopefully most of them. But there are allegations here, and there aren't any documents to support whether they were ever interviewed. And I know of at least one victim who reported her abuse in 2021, and she mentioned that there was never a follow-up. There was an intake taken, an intake form, but nobody ever reached out to her afterward and said, tell me about what happened to you. And that was in 2021. And so there's questions to be raised, and it isn't just a Republican or a Democrat issue. It is, there were problems with this DOJ throughout this past decade, at least, where it doesn't appear that they took this case seriously.
Today, no real answers after Ghislaine Maxwell stonewalled Congress, taking the fifth during her deposition, but making demands Survivors had warned the committee they were deeply concerned her appearance today risked becoming another opportunity for deception rather than truth. Joining us now, Vicky Ward, investigative journalist and executive producer of Discovery Plus's Chasing Ghislaine. You've spent, more than 2 decades following the story of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Any surprise at all that she came and asked for clemency and said, then I'll talk? And by the way, when I talk, I'm going to clear some folks?
No, none at all. I mean, her brother in England was saying exactly that she would do exactly this over the weekend. I mean, at this point, she has nothing to lose. So not surprised at all. She said nothing. I think what will be much more interesting and hopefully revealing is what Les Wexner, who has a billionaire who has everything to lose, will say to Congress. And then Richard Kahn and Darren Indyke, who were Epstein's longtime lawyer and accountant, respectively. We do see all sorts of communications between Epstein and them in this latest batch of files that have come out that would suggest, to me at least, they definitely knew something of what was going on. Sending Richard, he wants one woman to be able to go and pick out what she wants. I mean, come on. And so I think we hopefully will get more answers in their testimony than we did in Maxwell's. I'm not sure we're going to get much in the Clintons' testimony, other than Bill Clinton will, of course, be embarrassed. I mean, it was poor judgment. I don't think, poor judgment for a former president to go on a plane with a man who was surrounded by very young girls. I mean, this is a president who had dealt with the Monica Lewinsky scandal at the end of his presidency. So just the optics of that were bad. And I understand that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell gave him the money, and even I think in Maxwell's case, the idea for the Clinton Global Initiative, which went on to do wonderful things and saved many, many lives. It's just very unfortunate that the money came from a convicted pedophile.
Let me ask you again about what happened today in the deposition, because the question of clemency is not new.
No.
But it was very interesting what some members of Congress had to say when they came out of that less than half an hour exchange. Take a listen.
The attorney for Ms. Maxwell said that she has no indication and would say that neither Presidents Trump or Clinton are culpable for any wrongdoing.
The fact that Andy Biggs walked out of that room and delivered the message that Ghislaine Maxwell wanted was exactly what she wanted to send to Donald Trump.
Was that exactly what she wanted Donald Trump to hear? Give me clemency and I will stand before the world and say there was nothing untoward that you did.
Yes, of course. But it's kind of meaningless because she's already said that in that ridiculous interview she did with Todd Blanche, in which, it was filled with untruths. And this is a woman, let's not forget, who's been convicted of perjury. I actually have a wager with Julie Brown, the journalist who did that very important series in the Miami Herald.
Yeah.
Yes, which would it change the course of history on this story, right? Because after that, the Justice Department finally stepped into action and Jeffrey Epstein was finally indicted, and later Ghislaine Maxwell. My view on this, I know the president a little, is that he will not pardon Ghislaine Maxwell because there's nothing in it at this point for him. Julie Brown thinks on his way out that he will, so we'll see.
If she would answer questions truthfully,
yes.
How much does she really know?
If Ghislaine Maxwell was able to stand outside of herself, she has a really extraordinary story to tell, beginning with her father. A lot of Epstein's manipulative behavior, not just of young girls and of women, but of the global elite, comes from a sort of playbook that, in a way, was started by her father.
But you've reported on that. I mean, it's been that. But in terms of making a case that for the survivors would mean some level of justice, what does she know?
I think she knows everything.
Everything?
Yes. I think she knows everything. She was there. I mean, and when I sat through Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, you know, you heard from the survivors scene after scene of Ghislaine Maxwell being in the room as, you know, they were recruited and groomed. And then tragically, they in turn, some of them, recruited and groomed others. And it was like the mother hen was Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, there's a very sad scene in the late Virginia Giuffre's recent memoir, her posthumous memoir, in which she talks about, you know, why Jeffrey and Ghislaine together sucked her in. And it was because in the moments when she wasn't being abused, Ghislaine Maxwell was almost like the mother she never had. That's when you think about that, I mean, think about the manipulation these vulnerable girls were so susceptible to.
Vicky Ward, thank you so much.